Hi, and welcome to this installment of the Inner Circle Subscription Club tasting. Today we're here at South Shore Wine Company. We're up on the deck overlooking one of our neighbors' farms. I'm Mario Mazza.
I'm Blaine Ballard.
And we have today the flight from the Winemaker selection.
This is the Veraison installment of our wine club, the second of the 4 installments for the year. Chose four distinctly different wines that all carry a very good winemaking theme. The Pet Nat of Riesling, the La Anima Rosé, and the Forte of Cab Franc. So all 3 of these are very nice. Some higher end offerings that we have. Mario will give you a little information from the winemaking side. Well, we'll taste and talk about these. I'm real excited about this selection.
Yeah, these I think are all fun from a winemaking perspective. They're all smaller lot production, and each one has something that I would say is an interesting technique with regards to the winemaking aspect. It's a little bit of fun, maybe geeky for us as we go through harvest. So the first wine we have is a Pet Nat Riesling. So Pet Nats have gained some popularity recently, although it's a method that has been around for centuries in terms of sparkling winemaking. So most people are familiar with the more traditional champagne when it comes from Champagne, France, but a method Champenois wine that is fermented and the carbonation is natural. It's in the bottle. But often, or in all instances, that wine is riddled and disgorged, so there's clarity there. Pet Nat is short for Petulant Natural, or it's also known as Method Ancestral. So it's a method where the wine is fermented, and then while still fermenting, it is bottled, and that yeast continues to ferment. It leaves some natural, in this instance, a little natural residual sweetness, natural carbonation in the wine, but we don't disgorge it. So you notice there's some cloudiness to that because the yeast is still there in that wine. So it creates some rich and complexing characters. There's a bit of bottle-to-bottle variation actually with this wine, but they can be really interesting kind of unique takes. We did this with a Riesling Clone 90 variety from Moorhead Farms here located in Northeast. They're one of the earliest adopters and kind of pioneers of vinifera grape growing here in Lake Erie. And we took kind of a flyer on this, to be honest. It wasn't something that 5 years ago I don't think was in our plan, but we had the opportunity to do it. We've been making some sparklings at South Shore Wine Company, and we decided to expand that portfolio with taking a try at playing with some Pet Nat. This is it's a non-vintage labeling, but this is from our first iteration in 2018. So you'll notice again, it's got some turbidity to it. So if anybody out there's a craft beer drinker and drinking hazy IPAs, this will not be something unknown to you. Bit of effervescence, not as necessarily carbonated as you would find a traditional sparkling, and a little bit more hue and color because of that lees aging.
This is one of my favorites that we offer. It's you get a little bit of funk, for lack of a better term, on the nose. A lot of the breadiness of the yeast comes through.
It really comes through.
The effervescence isn't extremely pronounced, but it's definitely there. It dances on the palate.
I'd say it's somewhere between, a highly carbonated beer and a sparkling. So it's not overly effervescent, but really just carries that palate. The Clone 90 has a kind of a leaner, more austere minerality to the fruit characteristics, so I think that carries through nicely in here. And the acidity is really quite tight in this wine, which I think from a winemaking perspective makes a great selection with regards to its aptitude or ability to be used in a sparkling, and also the ability for this wine to hold up really well, as that acidity is going to help make that wine hold together great.
Yeah, I really look forward to tasting this down the line as it develops in the bottle. With these rustic wines like this, it's so much that happens. It's just a great wine.
I think there's kind of 2 things going on here. Rieslings, for anybody that is into the Rieslings, those wines can really age and develop some great characteristics, and now we're pairing that with Surly's aging in the bottle, which is also something that vintage champagnes you know, take and undergo in terms of aroma and flavor development. So we've married those two things by creating this wine. So fantastic drinking now. You know, sorry, we only sent you one bottle. You can order a few more and lay a few down and see how it progresses over time. I know we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second wine we've got is our L'Anima Rosé. Now this is under Mazza Vineyards branding. We have a kind of a subset called La Famiglia Mazza. So it's a small, what I would call almost experimental range of wines that we have tried, and winemakers or assistant winemakers that have been with or still with Mazza have contributed over time. And again, these are those fun experiments that we get to do at Harvest that kind of really show the passion. So this is a wine that was actually first started back in 2016 by Carolina, one of our former winemakers. She's from Uruguay, did a wonderful job with us for a couple of years, contributing and enhancing our winemaking. But she wanted to make a rosé in the Saunier style. So for those that are familiar with rosés, there's two styles of rosé making. The provincial method, or from Provence in France, and that is actually where you press fruit intentionally but not too hard to get a lighter color of rosé from a red grape, often harvested a little earlier than you normally harvest it for red winemaking. And then the Saunier method. The Saunier method is where we take a grape, in this instance a blend of Merlot, Blaufränkisch or Lemberger, and a bit of Cabernet Franc, and the red ferment that we have fermenting on the skins, after that's crushed into tank or fermenter, a little bit is drained off, and what we do is that lightly pink juice is then dedicated towards rosé winemaking. The remainder is now more concentrated for the red winemaking, so it actually achieves two things. We enhance the red winemaking, and we're able to make a rosé. We ferment the lots separately and then blend those components back together at the end. So the L'Anima, actually, L'Anima is Italian for the soul. Caroline always liked to think that, you know, during harvest you're pouring all of your effort into what you're doing. So she considered it something, you know, we left our souls in the cellar.
I love wines made in the Saunier method because you get that red fruit characteristic, but not quite as heavy and pronounced. So it's a lot lighter, has a little bit of levity, but you still get the richness of the Merlot and the Blaufränk and the Cab Franc in there. And it is it gives you a lot to think about on the palate and on the nose. And it you know, really good with food, extremely versatile because of those flavors from the reds, but the levity of the rosé.
Yeah, and this, I think, in terms of the portfolio that we have a couple other rosés. One of the most popular is the Veraison rosé. That's made in the provincial method from Chambourcin, but it's a very light, crisp, very drinkable, very approachable wine. This is a richer, carries a little bit more body, and it speaks to the varieties being used a little bit more. So really interesting. Again, I think both great wines in their own rights, but definitely just kind of highlights those different winemaking styles with rosé and the varietal influence that they can have as well. For the third wine that we have in this shipment, we have a fortified. So this is a ruby style port. It is the Forte of Cabernet Franc from Mazza Chautauqua Cellars. Now, for this wine, there's a couple of neat things going on. So the spirit that we use to fortify this wine is actually intentionally distilled at our own distillery, our sister distillery, 5 and 20 Spirits, for fortification. We take the grapes, the Cabernet Franc, that are fermenting, and in order to make this wine in a ruby style port, we actually start fermenting, but then we press off while there's still natural residual sweetness, and we add the alcohol, and that basically brings us up to this 19% alcohol, leaves natural residual sweetness in there, and then we transfer it into used whiskey barrels in this instance for further maturation. But we only mature it for less than 2 years. So really the goal is to retain that bright, again, ruby referring to that red color. This is not those longer aged tawny or vintage ports that have more developed or characteristics. This has a lot more brighter fruit varietal character that's carrying through in this wine.
Yeah, definitely a little bit lighter than a heavy tawny or ruby port, but it's you get a lot of those flavors, almost a little spiciness, a little cinnamon type feel to it.
Coming through from that Cabernet
yeah,
Franc, I think
yeah,
a little bit, and a little bit of the
definitely.
spice from the barrel from the ex-whiskey barrels as well. Yeah.
Yeah, really nice, great digestivo post dinner drink, or even with cheese and crackers or something pre-dinner.
So this is you know, a pretty varied selection, but really, again, as Blaine mentioned, you know, the thematic or the theme through these wines is there's some neat winemaking techniques that we get to play with in the cellar during harvest that really allow us to create some really unique wines that each one of them has a pretty cool story behind. So enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.